smiley, always still right by me. Make living lively, highly spoken of, my only love, the only one. You're my wifey, make my life complete, sweet. But you know when the flip is street freak, and only when it comes to me, see, that's why you're my one.
Welcome back, everybody. It's a continuation of our isolation tapes here with the guys from LODown podcast. I have Brendan supporting me today, but more importantly, we got our episode 3 of our Ross Embleton interview. Good afternoon, Ross.
Good afternoon, chaps. Hope everyone's keeping all right.
Yeah, all good, all good. We heard in episode 2 where Ross covered some real enlightening moments of the emotional journey he had working with Justin, and then that date in the 8th of June 2019 when the world changed. We was pleased to have that time, but we're going to move on now to this season. Really, it's really weird. We're still talking about this season, and it's nice and sunny outside. So Ross, welcome back, as I said. But what were the emotions like just before that Cheltenham game at home at the Brower Group for you and for the team?
It was like a lot of so many other things, and I've probably used the word God knows how many times, probably even in this interview, but throughout this season, it was so surreal. And even though I think I mentioned before about the minutes silence and minutes applause that a lot of the clubs during pre-season wanted to put together for the club and to show their support to us and obviously Justin and his family, nothing could have prepared us for that moment, that I suppose that build up to that game. But we obviously tried to keep everything as normal as we could and as similar to how everything had been done over pre-season. But quickly it wasn't going to be that way. I had a really strange journey into the stadium when Just was still with us, that me and my wife and kids would get to the bottom of the M11 and the A12, come off at the Eastway, like by the Olympic Village, and Just would always be in front of us, and he'd always let us cut in front of him because of how the traffic used to build up there. And I remember that day coming down the bottom of the M11, following that route, coming off and thinking, oh my God, like this is it was so surreal how it always used to happen on a match day. We used to time our journey to exactly the same point. But I come off and my first thing was like, oh, it was like almost like the weirdest, most simplest little thing that made it such a reminder. And pretty much from then, really, that I realised it weren't going to be the same. But like I've said before, it was about just putting on game face a little bit and trying to show the boys that the focus was on the game and that sort of thing. And I went upstairs to sort my tickets out into reception, and I gave my tickets to someone, and someone I'd never met before walked past me, shook my hand and said something along the lines of, thanks for stepping in and doing what you're doing. And I crumbled. So if that person's listening, I've never seen them again since, and like I said, I'd never met them before. But as I got a second or two into that handshake, I just sort of half run off, and I had a meltdown. I was like a quivering wreck. And I sort of run myself upstairs into the office and had a bit of time to myself just to try and settle myself down. And like I say, I think it was really that moment when I come off the A12 that I realised it wasn't going to be the same. And that, you know, the build up and everything else. But the minute silence is something I will never forget. You know, the flags and the tributes. I think it's probably the great time to mention that there'll probably always be a bond, I think, from my perspective, but from the club's perspective with Cheltenham Town and their fans, because obviously the flag and the support that they put together, and they were going to be the first ones that we came up against. So, like I say, all the preparation, so to speak, that had gone in over pre-season for that moment, the emotional side of it, it hit me like a bus, to be honest, by the time I got to the stadium. And I think once the minute silence was over, sort of run onto the pitch and try to have a brief few words with the boys, just to sort of say again, like, come on, it's about the football now. This is where it all starts. We need to show our appreciation even more for him by getting a result today. And, you know, nothing that was rocket science. But my biggest focus always for it was to try and make sure the boys were emotionally capable of starting and then getting through that game. It wasn't about me, but all I can talk about is how it felt from my perspective.
Ross, you shared a few times when I've interviewed you previously about hearing the fans sort of get into the atmosphere outside the pitch, you know, so whether that's positive or negative, we're going to park that. On that day, I sensed it as a fan. It was a weird feeling, you know. wasn't negative. It was sad, but for me, it was real felt together. Yeah, look, whatever happened on that pitch, that 90 minutes, we were there together, and we all wanted to be there. Every single person in that stadium wanted to be there. Appreciate the family themselves. It was probably not what they wanted, regardless to they rather had Justin around. But I think everyone there wanted that. Did you sense that from the touchline?
Yeah, I think it's important though what you said about parking that though, because for me, like I take a lot of the feeling of the atmosphere and the crowd, because you know people will think it sounds a bit cringy or corny, but I've sat there and it's meant that to me. And you know I've travelled and watched my team, and I was talking about it this morning to my kids about with it being a year since we got the result at Solihull, and moments like that. So the good and the bad, I hear the great things that are sung and the things that are said from the crowd, and then I hear the negative things. But that's because it means a lot to me, and I want it to mean, I know how much it means to people to be sat in that stand. But like you said, on that day, it was an experience and a feeling that, well, I hope I don't have to go through. I hope none of us ever have to go through that ever again. But it was even like the moments of quiet in the game, which is what happens in games of football. It was just, I don't know if eerie is the right word. I found it reassuring by the time we got into the game. I think is probably the best way of doing it. Probably because there were so many people that were having similar emotions, whether it was me, the players, whether it was the staff, whether it was you or and other people around the crowd, however much or however many, how small you had met or known Just, you had a real attachment to him because of what had happened the season before. And like I said in the last episode, the type of bloke that he sort of dragged you in towards him, So I think for me in the end, it became like a reassurance that one, that the football was back, two, that we obviously got a result, three, that we come through it, unscathed, and then like you said, that everyone was in it together.
You couldn't have written it, could you? Josh scoring the goal. It just was literally, that was written in the gods. I mean, that must have been an amazing feeling. But how did you feel as the gaffer at the time, the manager saying, yeah, he was the right person I know you don't care who scores, we win, the win's a win, but having him score that goal and getting us the result?
I think any of the boys that had been with us last season, had they been the ones on the score sheet, there'd have been a story to go alongside the fact that they'd got the goal on that day. But because of the attachment, not just with Just, but how close Josh is to Justin's family and all that sort of thing, it was, well, I suppose like a lot of things that have happened this season, you sort of think that you've got over one moment of ridiculousness or something outrageous happening, and then it gets replaced with it by another one. So, like you say, written in the stars for me, and like I say, it was great that he found his way into the box and he was calm enough to put it over the line and do what he did to get us the points.
And for me, Cheltenham obviously was a highlight of the season, but also we followed that up quite quickly with that result against Mansfield, where we had that mad comeback when we were 2-0 down. And you got involved with the celebrations a bit. Would you say that's one of the better games of the season for you as well?
I wouldn't say games, because the first half was rubbish. I think there's been a number of performances this year where the actual performance or the game that we've put together has been better, and we've not come out of it with the points that we deserved. But for me, it's certainly the one that sticks with me. There was loads last year, but from a personal perspective, that Mansfield one, because the biggest thing for me as well was it was probably the first time that I really steamed into the boys and give them a rocket at half time, because I'd asked them to go out and start the game in a certain manner, in a certain way, and we didn't do it. We didn't play particularly well. We come in obviously 2-0 down at half time, and it was the first time that I really let the shackles off and told them what I thought in a different manner to probably how I'd always approach things. And I'm not saying that got the reaction. We changed a number of things, formation, personnel, whatever else it was, and we come out and we had a right go. But I'll tell you what we did feel on that day was, as soon as we got the first one, I really thought we were going to go on and win it. I didn't think we were going to get it so late. And by the time it got to that stage, it was, we were happy with a point. But it really had that feel about, oh my God, we might turn this on its head here. So it's definitely a memorable one, albeit, like I say, the first half really disappointed me.
I think you're right. I think that to me was not a defining moment because only a couple of games in, But regards to, I think we saw you definitely had said something at half time because that was a different lineup, a different approach in the second half. Yeah. I want you to apologise because I was about to leave and go and have a KFC. But then I thought, no, I can't do it. I've driven them all this way. I'm going to at least let the see out to the 90 minutes. And glad I did. And I think one of the things that sort of for me resonates is I was coming home south. I stopped to the services, bumped into Leanne Go actually in the services. I'm not going to grass him on what rubbish he was eating at the services, Ross. I'll leave that to you. But I think he was there with his brother or someone, some mates. And do you know what? You could see on his face, I know it was his previous club and the history that goes with that, but you can see on his face what it meant. And also, a couple of randoms, me and my youngest, bumping into and having a chat with him and at study o'clock at the services. So that to me, I was thinking, right, okay, this is the new boys that's come in. They're up for it. They've got something about them, and I know they've had a variety of challenges over this season. The players you brought in, but that seemed for us, and I think that was for me. And I know when we can talk about the games and the run of the games you assessed before you stood down as interim boss, but I think that was a defining moment to say, right, we're in it together, and the passion that came across from the players. I know they were coming towards our end, but the passion from the players was immense in that second half.
I think because of the ups and downs and the chops and changes that have gone on, and I think I said it to you previously that I was as guilty of that as anybody else in terms of that. Just use that game as an example where we were poor in the first half, we're good in the second half. Doesn't always mean that's how you should start the next game. And those are the little things that I learned about myself. But what I would say is there's only been like a couple of periods for me during the season where I can say that the group have looked flat or not quite, that togetherness word that's been used so much in the last year or two hasn't quite been there, and I think circumstances have added to that. But when it comes to togetherness has been a word that we've used a lot in the last 2 years, and I think that was a big thing that got us through the back end of last season to win it, that camaraderie and that bond between the group. And I think obviously it's very, very hard to create when you're bringing in new players, and it was tough to create it in the summer that we had. But there's been one or two moments when it's gone a little bit flat for us this year. But I think there's been a lot more games where we could have been on a similar level to Mansfield and we could have made our mark against probably better teams. I think the games like Stevenage, have not had a great season and they're in trouble. But we absolutely hammered Stevenage at home and didn't take our chances. We had very similar performance against Crawley and come away with it without any points. And then I think also as well, a game at home that we forget about is the Crewe game when we were one up and missed a penalty and ended up losing the game 2-1. Do you know what I mean? So there's moments in the season where I look and we could have turned our season into a very, very different one. And I know everybody can say that if buts and maybes, he said, she said, but I think the actual performances on some of those occasions turned into results. So then we all walk away with a negative feel about it, as opposed to getting through some of those moments and not letting in sloppy goals or letting ourselves down could have really given us a bit bigger platform and then galvanised the group a little bit more.
And as we went into like the autumn sort of time, there's a bit of a downturn in results, and from my mind there was one kind of unsavoury moment at the Colchester game, and we spoke about like fans getting involved and how that affects you. How does it affect you when these things start to happen? And did that play a part in your decision to step down?
Honestly, it didn't play a part in my decision to step down because I always, like I've said all along, it wasn't a plan for me to become the head coach on a permanent basis. It affects me because I'm human. It affects me because, in a big way, because my family love Leyton Orient. My wife had no interest in football when we first got together and hasn't had much interest until recently. My kids absolutely love Leyton Orient. Again, because they were so young, they never had much to do with the club until I came back here, but they love every part of it. And when we go to games, especially if the board members are in a certain nice fluffy section of the stadium, but they don't want to be there. They want, when they look at people singing a song, what they do on the way home, they've got their fans, they love the club and what goes on in exactly the same way. So I feel that she sees it every home game. And the fact that we played Colchester at home, it seemed like the right thing to do to let her go and sit and mingle and be part of that. And I think that's what makes me a relationship with the supporters, that they should be able to. I think that, I said earlier, it will always impact me. What people, I want to give people answers. I want to be able to answer people's questions after games on a number of occasions. Whether that's right or wrong remains to be seen, and it's a decision that we make as we go along our journey. But the answer to your question is, it didn't make my decision for me, because ultimately all along I knew that being the head coach on a permanent basis at that time wasn't what I wanted to do.
So Ross, we've spoken previously about your dad and the influences, and I spoke to you, I think, pitch side, and asked you who was the first person you called when you accepted the role, and then you mentioned your wife previously. So when you're looking for advice, who's your go-to people? Who in the club do you talk to? I presume Martin, but family outside the club, other footballing people. Do you have a bit of a mixture of people?
Sorry. So yeah. So I think I'm a bit strange in terms of the way that I try to deal with certain elements and certain aspects with how certain things affect me. My dad's been a massive influence on my career, obviously on my life, and he has a huge interest in what we do as a team, and obviously how it affects my career and the results that it gets for the club. But I don't burden my dad with too much. Should have done this, should have done that. One, because I'm sure he won't mind me saying it, but he's a warrior. He wants the best for me, and he wants to know that everything that I'm doing right is going to turn out to be right for me and my family. So I don't burden him with do I play 4-3-3? Do I play one up front? Do I play him on the left, him on the right? It's more, I suppose, the people side of things that I speak to my dad about the types of conversations I have. When I approach this one, when I approach that one. And I have a very similar relationship in the way in which I when I say I use Martin, I mean that in the right possible way. But the things that me and Martin discuss are very similar like that. When should I pull this one? I'm dropping this player. Do I have to tell them every time I'm leaving someone out? Or, I'm having a few issues with this player. How would you approach it? Those sort of people skills, man management types of things are the things that I speak to my dad about, and the things that I speak to Martin about. My wife manages me well, but then at the same time, I'm not one of them people that comes home and boots things around the house when we get beat. I'm actually, as I look at things now during this break, I actually don't think I enjoy the wins enough. Yeah. So I come home and I like a nigh-on bottle of wine after the game's finished in the office. I do like a good social gathering type atmosphere. So in Martin's office, on the office floors at the stadium, I invite as many of the staff that are there, partners, kids, families, friends, people that have come to watch the game into that environment. And I have a few glasses of wine, and everyone has a drink, and it's a real good occasion. And that I really enjoy that. And I really sort of make the most of it. But I do then think that as soon as I get home and get up the next day, it's almost, I start worrying and thinking about the next one. And I want to keep that momentum going. As opposed to when we lose, I know that the next morning, the next day, I'm going to sit there analysing it, watching it, talking to the staff about what we need to do to correct it and put it right and move on and get better and all of those sorts of things. So it's almost a little bit more upside down in terms of that sort of thing. And obviously having two young kids sometimes helps you manage that situation anyway, because I come home and I've got no choice other than to go out in the garden and smash footballs at him because he wants to be in goal, or me be the goalkeeper. I'm just his dad, and he couldn't give he couldn't give two hoots about whether or not I've got the ump about the fact that the left winger didn't tuck in well enough, those sorts of things. So family life looks after it to a degree. My wife's outlook on football and that sort of thing, obviously she had a massive impact on me ending up sort of becoming the head coach and that sort of thing, because I needed to know that I had a support behind me. So I think collectively as a family, we keep it real a little bit. But like I say, I probably need to let the shackles off a little bit more when we win a few games, because like I say, analysis and really reviewing where it went wrong is something that that my Sundays end up being when it hasn't gone quite according to plan.
I think reviewing it when it's what you win, and I think it's that feeling, isn't it? We talk about emotions, and we have talked about emotions over the last couple of episodes. But is that emotions of winning is a nice emotion, but actually that's a mental state as well, and that helps and to take things forward. So when we got to that time when you went, you know what? I know it was. You didn't say it was being influenced by other things, but when you went, you know what? I've had it. I don't want to be interim boss anymore. I've went to the board or Martin, whoever your route to. When did you, in your heart of heart, did you feel you're making the right decision?
I think the day I had to make it, or the night before I had to make it, for definite. I was having a lot of conversations with fans, with some of the lads, not so much the staff, but the players and supporters, people like that around the club, about when they're going to make you the permanent manager. And I knew I didn't want to be the manager. I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do at the time, and I didn't think it was the right circumstances. And I'm not sure if I've said this to you or other people. I know I've said it to a number of people, but when and if whether it's been exposed. But the biggest thing for me behind one obviously I'd never perceived myself as being a head coach, but secondly, one of the biggest things that I really found as a challenge that I didn't want for me and for the players, and obviously for the club, was I always felt in those early months that I was still managing Justin's team, and I felt that no matter what I tried, or what I really wanted to do, a lot of things always came back that related to him, which was natural. It was normal. But I didn't feel it was the right circumstances for me and for the club for me to take that responsibility. So Nigel was coming over, and I'd had some really good conversations with him on the phone, with Kent on the phone, about what I'd done and the things I'd changed and the way I'd gone about the job and certain things I was doing. They'd obviously come in and seen me work with the players and the atmosphere that we'd put together and that sort of thing. And they were very complimentary. And Nigel was coming over, and I thought, oh, this might be the time when these discussions start to happen. And Martin said to me, Nigel wants to see you and a number of the staff tomorrow and have a chat about how things are going. And I pretty much knew then. And I knew personally that I didn't want it to be done then. I think I'd have been more than happy, like I said to you the other day, I'd be more happy to carry on in the role that I was. If someone had said to me, if he'd have said to me that day, right, look, I think in 3 months' time that we're going to make it a permanent role, are you okay to carry on? Yeah, no problem. But to actually make that definitive permanent decision then, it just didn't sit right with me. And we come over and he met with the staff separately and spoke through them, met with a couple of the players and all those sorts of things that he'd done over the summer before the decision was made for me to step into the role originally. And then we sat down and he talked to me about, how did I feel about the role becoming permanent? And I said, no, it's not something I want to do. I think it probably caught him off guard to a degree, because a number of other people have been positive about it becoming permanent. But I just said to him for a number of different reasons. And he was fantastic with me because he said, don't be hasty, don't rush into things. Sometimes you need to put your neck on the line when it doesn't feel comfortable. And it was never about the fact that I didn't feel comfortable. It was just how the whole thing felt wasn't right for everybody. So I think then I knew, and actually sitting in front of him and telling him, no, I'm happy to give up this opportunity, if you like. It felt fine because deep down in my heart, I knew that it was the right thing to do.
I mean, he had to respect you because I think, as you said earlier, when this journey started for you, you was in the US with him, and it's seen both sides of the coin as such. And I think the honesty piece, quite quickly for you to go, I'll step in and do whatever it needs to do to keep things moving forward, give the players and the club the chance to grieve and make some decisions without haste. And now, I must admit, personally, I would have been in issues. I would have been quite surprised because you didn't do a bad job, and that was. And okay, he's always going to get a section of the fans, the media are going to go, want a full-time coach. I want someone with experience, and are we sugarcoating over something which has not been brilliant? But reality is, you weren't bad, and that's the things I think he probably saw. And when you threw that spanner in the works, it's probably a bit of okay.
I think from his perspective, my perspective, and everybody related to who was making those decisions at the time about what was going to happen, I think the biggest thing that, again, come back to everything being so difficult and so surreal, was what was a good season supposed to look like for us this season. Don't get relegated. I sat down over the summer and discussed with the boys about targets of trying to finish mid-table, and I had to sort of then follow up with some of them. I know that disappoints you, but it's going to be a rocky road, and it's already, it already is so rocky. So what does a good season look like? Don't get me wrong, that's not me telling you all that we've had a good season, but I think, like you said there, it probably got to a point there where he felt like we were a little bit more stable. Things are right. Players probably need clarity. Staff probably want clarity. The fans want clarity, because I know that means a hell of a lot to all of us at the club, that there was clarification of what direction we were going in. But, there is a part in it where I have to be selfish, or had to be selfish at that time, and worry about what would be right for me. And ultimately, me thinking like that was wanting everything to be right by the club as well.
So welcome back. Some of us have gone off and had a wash and a change. Some of us haven't. And one of us has found a baseball cap from somewhere. So Ross, if you hadn't have taken the job as first team head coach, who would you have liked to work under?
Your first reaction is to look at the top people, innit, and say that I wouldn't have minded Pep and Klopp coming into work at Leyton Orient. But
it could have been Klopp. We've got a relationship, haven't we, with our friends at Liverpool?
Exactly, yeah. New Balance might have been able to swing a deal in our favour, mightn't they? I think the interesting thing for me with how it panned out is obviously looking at the people that were up for the job at the time. I think it'd be silly of me to sit here and say, "Oh, manager A," and he wasn't ever within the running, because there's obviously some very good people out there that I'm sure I would have learned a lot of being their assistant. But there was obviously names like Colin Calderwood that were, or he was in a job at the moment, so I'm probably talking a little bit out of turn and wrong in that context. But I know his name was bandied around, and in the I suppose the top end of the odds and that sort of thing. And I know I've met Colin sort of 5 or 6 times, a couple of times since he's left Cambridge, and always struck me as a really good guy. I met him on a number of occasions through Just, where we trained at Aston Villa and stuff like that, and he always come across as a really sort of straight and honest guy. I don't know much about him in terms of a football context, but just as a person, he came across really well. The other one that was in the shortlist, or in the running for the job, if you like, was Darren Curry. Darren's someone that I wouldn't say he's a mate, but I would say someone that I'd pick the phone up to if it was about a player, or I'd run an idea past him if it was a team that he might have played against, or that sort of thing, because I respect his opinion and I like the way his teams play. So I suppose I'm probably not giving a total... I'm not being honest, but I'm probably not giving a total upfront thing of, that's someone I would have liked to have worked for. Those people are out there, but I'm sort of trying to answer your question in a context where it was people that maybe potentially were in and around the reckoning at the time when the job came up.
Can I throw another one in there just quickly? So we saw the odds a lot, didn't we, across every single betting platform, and I presume our lovely players are all quite apt at using those apps. Was there any conversations around the training ground about who they fancied, who they've heard from a friend of a friend of a friend is in the frame? Anything that went on? A bit of banter?
I think definitely those couple of names that I've mentioned there were names that were flying around. And what you tended to get probably this time more than when Steve left and Justin came in was it seemed to be obviously probably a little bit of a longer period in terms of how that built up, and there was a lot of sort of to-in and fro-in. There was never any real clear definition of this one's definitely going to start coming to the fore. But what you get more of, or got more of out of this experience, was more of the sort of conversations of, oh, I've heard so-and-so's name mentioned. What's he like? So, and I was the same. I'd speak to other managers and they'd say to me, oh, anyone in the running? I'd say, no, this one's been mentioned, you know him? And then you get sort of reactions from people that may or may not have worked with someone before, the type of characteristics they are, because I think, not that the football becomes secondary, not by any stretch, but when you're going into that environment, like it would be for you, you're going to start having to go to work with someone every day and have to spend a lot of time with them, travel with them, all those sorts of things. You want to know that it's going to be a guy that you can get along with, or that it's a guy that's got some conversation or personality. And I think those were really the real conversations that took part of the training ground, was someone coming to me and saying, oh, do you know anything about him? Or, oh, I've heard this one's mentioned. That, you know, or the other side of it is, oh, you know, I remember you played with so-and-so. Can you find out a little bit more about him? Those sorts of conversations about it. So there was never really too much like real clarity, because I don't think there was any real clarity all the way through it as to an outright favourite who was going to get the job.
So we saw Ian Holloway's name mentioned quite a bit, and now we know he's at Grimsby. So that's sort of, for me, and it was really strange as a fan. I felt whether you was going to step up or not, that was probably part to that time, because reality is we're looking for a manager. I thought the characteristic of Ian Holloway, you know, he's won it, done it. He's been in the Prem. He's managed some great sides. He's got promotion. He's a bit of a character, you know, and we all knew Justin was a slightly different character, but he was a character, you know. He was the face of Orient, and that sort of person was something I was interested to hopefully he was moving more. But we all see that. I think he's gone on and he got some investment now within Grimsby, slightly different approach. Have you? Because he came to the club, didn't he, when Grimsby played us? You know, did you have any time with him?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I spoke to him over the summer on a couple of TalkSport phone-ins, obviously regarding Justin, to be honest. And I didn't really ever really hear his name mentioned. So he wasn't someone that I sort of really went, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind working for him. But like you say, you all know he's had a real big personality. The other thing that you would say that is a big plus about someone like Ian was that, if you remember his Blackpool teams and stuff like that, away from some of the other achievements he's had, but the style of football that they played, it was really entertaining. So I think he'd always be someone that turns your head. I think people were probably aware that years and years ago, probably around the time that Martin sort of left the club as manager, there was some conversations with Ian Holloway, but his wage demands and that sort of thing far outweighed what the club were in that running for him. And then, like you say, now he's gone into Grimsby, but albeit with a different interest. When he came to our game, I had no idea whether he would even know that I was the same person that he'd spoken to on the phone with TalkSport, and didn't really like most of the time. Didn't really get much interaction with him before the game, but at full time and after the game, he was absolutely outstanding with me. Spoke to me about all the teams that he'd watched and they'd played, not that they'd played many in that build-up, but the teams he'd watched in preparation for all the games that he'd had and when he was going into Grimsby. And he said that our team, my team, in terms of the context that he put it over to me, were the best team he'd seen, and that I should believe in myself a little bit more and I should back myself. And a little bit like the conversation I had with my wife, really, about when we made when I made the decision to take the job on a permanent basis, that sometimes life's a bit too short and you need to grab these opportunities with both hands. And he was really supportive, really reassuring. And like you said, that big personality really came out. So I'm sure he would have been a great person to work with. I actually know the Grimsby assistant manager quite well. I get little bits of feedback as to what type of guy that he is and what sort of manager he is to work for. So I'm sure it would have been a laugh a minute and a real entertaining person to have worked for. But like I say, at the time, I don't really remember there being too many rumours about him actually, coming in to take the job. Probably because of some of the jobs he's had and the salary that he probably would have dictated.
Yeah, I think that was some of the feedback. I must admit, I had pictures on my wall, Ross. I was looking forward to him joining. Love sport every week. We used to tell him, Ian Holloway, you look back on our previous episodes, and I must admit, I was handed out on Twitter a few times being absolutely shitty. But yeah, I think the wage demands and again how he structured that in Grimsby slightly different. So I think Brendan's got something to talk to you about. But before I go there. The other thing that was mentioned a bit, and I don't know if he ever got back to you as such, is that you stepping up to being a manager, and we'll talk about that in a minute with Brendan, but with a real sort of like an old head as your number two, someone who's done it, seen it, got the T-shirt. How do you think that would have worked or not?
I certainly think it can work and could work, and it's certainly not something that I'm closed-minded to anyway. Because I think there is always things that I need to get better at. These things that that someone with that little bit more experience would probably focus on that are different to the things that I focus on, both during the week and on a match day. So I'm certainly open-minded to the idea, but I think the real difficult thing is finding that person. Obviously, I've got Martin, I think we've mentioned previously, that really gives me a lot of support in terms of how to deal with people, the conversations to have, when to approach things, and the man management side of things. But it's well documented that he doesn't get involved in the team and he doesn't get involved in training. And like you say, maybe someone with a little bit more of a different angle of approach, maybe a little bit more experience and I suppose a little bit more of a calmness around the place. Could certainly add a big string to our bow, but he's finding that right person. I've sort of looked into and had the opportunity to sort of have, I suppose the cool word to use now is like a mentor and someone that you can go to. But the 2 or 3 people that I've tried that with in recent times have had very, very contrasting opinions to me. And I think sometimes black and white, yin and yang, all that sort of good cop, bad cop sort of approach can work. But at the same time, there's got to be a common theme, whether that's you as a personality or you as personalities or your football understanding. I don't think you can go into a relationship like that. I remember Martin always describing it as like a second marriage, that you spend so much time with that person. They've got to have your back. You've got to have their back. That when you let them go and take training, that they're going to go and deliver the things that you really need and want for you, the team and the players. So I think those things are really important. So the answer to the question simply, I suppose, is that if that person's out there and I find that person and come across it, would have certainly been an approach that we would go down. Me and Martin have had those conversations again, but it came back to, or has come back to, exactly who that person might be that's out there to give you that.
And you mentioned about speaking to your wife about stepping up and taking a role permanently. Can you kind of pinpoint an exact moment where you thought, because you've been all summer and even on this show you said you didn't want to be a manager, you were happy stepping in, but can you pinpoint a kind of moment where you went, this is the time, I'm ready for it, I want to step up now?
I wouldn't say there was like this big light bulb moment situation. I think after the Scunthorpe and the Forest Green games which followed, a little bit like my interim period when Steve came, we weren't far away from getting results. Like the Scunthorpe game was a bit of a nothing dead game, and we didn't get anything out of it. But at the same time, the Forest Green game, with all the events that went on and all the drama, one of the major things that came out of that was we went toe-to-toe with one of the top teams on that day, and albeit the scoreline was 4-2, we hit the crossbar and were almost level with them before they got that 4th goal. And then after that, we had a couple of games where, again, the results hadn't all gone in our direction and hadn't gone our way, but I could start to see or feel that the players were different towards me. They started to treat me a little bit more like the manager, so we started to have a bit of a distance and a gap between us, which I think was healthy and probably the right thing that we needed, and probably natural once it becomes clearer that someone might be taking control of something.
I think the massive one, not like I was saying this is exactly the moment, but I think a huge occasion was the Oldham game. I think the fact that I made big changes, potentially what you'd regard as maybe bold changes at the time, and taking one or two players out of the team, one or two that didn't warrant it. And I think with examples of that is obviously, I left Dino out, but I think Sarge had been doing well as his replacement. Probably the first time that I'd left Josh Coulson out the team. Matty had come out, and then also we'd gone to Bristol Rovers in the week that week, and I left Broth out because he'd had a few little niggles, and I said to him, "It's a cup game. I'm going to give you a bit of an opportunity to rest. You've done really well. Just get your head right for the weekend." And we come to the weekend because we performed well on the night. I put Jordan in instead of Broth, and I could see him sort of looking at me as if to say, "Hold on a minute, it was your idea that I didn't travel Tuesday, and then now all of a sudden I'm out the team." So it weren't necessarily them ones that everyone went, "Oh, he's made these big changes." It was decisions like that where actually I sat there and thought, "No, this is right for the team. This is the right decision for this game at the weekend." It turned out to be one of the worst games of football I've ever watched. But what we did do on that day was we showed, a bit of grit, determination, battling qualities to go away from home against Oldham and earn ourselves a point without playing well. So I really felt that I got back on the coach after that game that weekend and really started to reflect on actually making these manager decisions, making these decisions that put a bit of a wedge and sort of recreate a new relationship with my players. I don't feel quite uncertain about it, and I felt all of that despite the fact that we weren't on a 10-game winning run. It was in a period where it was tough, and also coming out of a period that had been tough and a season that we've obviously documented it on here was so unique and such a one-off. So to come through all of those experiences that were very, very tough and still sort of feel actually I might be able to do this, really, really helped.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned that Oldham game because as a fan, that was the first time I kind of looked at the team sheet and went, "This is Ross's team. He's made some big calls here. He's taken charge almost." And something that's been like a kind of key theme of your permanent stint is you kind of stuck with that 4-3-3 system that we've used. And is that something you reflected on your first spell in charge where you thought, I need a bit of consistency here. I need to find a way of playing. I want to stick to it.
Yeah, I think so. And what I've learned about myself and about management has been that it's not always about the formation that you like or the system that you like or the way that you play in terms of the football that you want to choose to watch when you watch football. It's not always about that. It's about what's most effective for the team. And that sounds like a simple concept, but finding that was really, really hard. And I looked for it too much in my first interim spell. And when I reflected on it, I knew that. I knew I'd made too many changes. I think some of that was down to performances that, and also I think from my perspective, I was too gung-ho. I wanted to be probably perceived and seen as this creative manager who could make big and bold decisions. But you can make big and bold decisions while sticking to a formula or sticking to something that gives people clarity. And I think, I'm sure people will have, will agree or disagree with us playing 4-3-3, but I think we have an abundance of attacking players. I like having two strikers, but at the same time, what you need is stability and a good setup behind those strikers as well in order to make it right by the team. And I felt that we had good midfield players that give us real, made us solid in the middle of the pitch. And then the three strikers or three attackers gives us a real opportunity to get a lot of those attacking players in the team. And what we've done since we sort of found that was going to be the way that we wanted to go, I felt that sticking with that would give the players a little bit more familiarity, give them a little bit understanding of what I want. Then it was about how much I work with them and show them what it looks like and what we need to do. And I think there's been occasions where we've tweaked and moved players around. For argument's sake, James Brophy playing at left back, George Marsh playing at right back. If I'm honest, at some stages, those were like almost like need-must decisions. One, because of performance, but two, because of injuries. We put them into those positions, and so far it's worked. So I think that's that's sort of where it's come from. Like I say, I never set out to sort of say I'm a 4-3-3 manager and that's what I want my team to do. But I think we've sort of fallen and come towards something that's given us a bit of a recipe that really since, I suppose, early January has started to look better.
You talk about George Marshall and the Brophy left and right backs. I think it's a bit of a masterstroke. I know it was influenced by other reasons than just that you thought they're the great players, the best players for that position. But I think early doors, and I think as a fan, we used to come to the ground and we would look at the team sheet and it would take us 30 minutes trying to work out the formation you were going to try to play because we've been through everything. And I think that stability, I know you recognised it, you mentioned it just there, but I think you mentioned this a number of times before, is that sometimes... I think as a fan, we sit like in the 70th, 60th minute. So how's he going to change it up? And changing the system is not always the right thing to do. And we can see that because you've got 5 days to work on the prep for a game. You can't go through 4 or 5 different systems. And I remember under Steve, there was a game, I think it was the game, I can't remember the team. I think that was the one that put the nail in the coffin. I think he tried to change it about the system about 3 or 4 times in one game. And as fans, we was all going, man, I wouldn't even remember where I was supposed to be. And you could see some of the players going, do I push on? Do I hold? Yeah. To cut inside?
It's very interesting because, like, obviously now the position I'm in, I look back on everything and all the people I've worked for and that sort of thing. And I remember 2 things spring to mind in terms of the context of the conversation that we're having. One is that game, which was Halifax at home. We changed a lot. And what a lot of people probably won't realise is that is pressure. That is pressure sometimes. When it's going wrong, you think, if I do this, it might just work. But like you said, sometimes, unless you've had the opportunity to really work with your group of players and show them exactly what it looks like, it's tough to just chop and change things around. So, but that pressure does amazing things to you. You sometimes you're standing there and you think, if I just change this, it might nick us a result and kick something into gear. And it's a horrible feeling when you can feel that sort of running away from you and you're almost helpless, but trying to do more than you should to get there. And I also think back to when Martin was manager and we got promotion. I remember when and this is one of the only sort of football type conversations that Martin and I had this season, was he said to me about keeping things simple, not trying to overdo it, and like I say, it fitted in with some of the analysis or review that I'd done on myself. And I remember when he was manager of the team, a lot of the time when the year we got promoted, he would have for the argument's sake, Lee Steele and Gary Alexander up front, and the 2 subs he might make might be to take them 2 off and bring 2 new ones on. It might have been to take one of the, a winger and a striker off, but stuck to the same sort of theme. And I think them players have a real clarity and an understanding. I'm not saying you should never tweak things, because certainly sometimes you change the formation, it can hurt an opposition. But it certainly taught me a lot about trying to keep things clear and give people a real understanding of what their expectations are. And so far, in terms of the change that it's seen us in terms of our home form and the upturn in performances, for me, a more consistent performances since early January, it reflects what I suppose I thought.
So we're coming sort of drawing to a natural end now, and it's been an absolute pleasure sort of chatting with you. So one thing before we go, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on how the season's gone so far. Not the results, because we all know those. We all can do the numbers, see where we are in the league. From your own personal targets and your goals you set yourself to achieve, how are you faring against those? And as in your development as a coach and a manager, what do you think the next sort of 5 to 10 years sort of looks like for you, for Ross Embleton?
I think ultimately everybody, including myself, will be disappointed with the way the season has panned out. I've got no shame in admitting that I suppose the sort of original ideas in my mind was for us to try to strive to finish mid-table this year, but we didn't really know what the impact of everything was going to be. Ultimately, everyone that I spoke to, manager-wise, opposition managers in the build-up to the season, and once the season was in its early stages, it was, if you stay up this year, you've done really, really well. because of the circumstances. And I was never happy with that, and I wouldn't expect anybody else to be in the same mindset, because I think we have a squad that's capable of achieving more than we have. But ultimately, the position in the league disappoints me. What I would say is now we have got clarity, or since we got clarity, it's very easy for people to look back and say, I did this when I was interim manager. The seasons look like it. Ultimately, now there's clarity, and I am now the manager. And since that, we have improved. And I think, to be honest, whether we do get to finish the season or we don't, I strongly feel or believe that we would have got a lot closer to that mid-table finish than perhaps we thought we would have done in and around Christmas. So I think there's been a turn for the positive. With regards to like the longer term, I think it's really dangerous to plan too far ahead. You know, if I live in dreamland and say that I want to be here for the next 10 years and I want to win everything and I want to get us promoted and end up in the Premier League, then, you know, those stories do happen, as we see with some clubs. But at the same time, you know, we have to be realistic. But that's the ultimate dream. And ultimately, from a selfish perspective, I want to reach that goal. I look at examples. I don't know them, but I look at the Cowleys in terms of the route they've taken, and you know, no real playing background, and they've climbed the ladder and they're now working in the Championship. I think, you know, I strive to achieve things like that. I look at people like Dean Smith, who had a great career in comparison to mine, because he's someone I know, and obviously someone that started his coaching at this club. He's gone on to achieve incredible things, and I'd love to, and I aspire to reach that goal either with the club or in the longer term, or, you know, on my own. You know, but I think at the same time, realistic, you know, targets and ambitions are the things that you have to have as a football manager. And I look at longevity in the job, and I say, what does that look like? Is it 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? You know, I think those things are important for me to set targets like that. And what's going to keep me in this job and in reaching those goals will be if we continue to improve season by season. So it will be about next year making us better, top half of the fit table finish, because I think once you aspire and you can reach those sorts of goals, then the playoffs are not too far away. And obviously then improving and increasing and striving for more. So I want to get us out of this league. And like I say, I think if you have those realistic targets, you have more chance of achieving the longer term goals that you mentioned. Now, I think one thing that does happen a lot in this game is that people have a good run, 5 games, 10 games on the spin, and start talking about their move, their next job, their next opportunity. And I think that's really, really dangerous. I think in my position, it's about looking after the here and now, doing the very best that you can in the role that you're in, and making sure you're the very, very best you can be, and your team and the club are, and it will hopefully look after the longer term. Because I am, you know, not stupid to know that, you know, if I got this really, really wrong really, really quickly, it's you know, the percentages tell you that I'm likely to not get another chance at it. So my realistic and short-term goals, hopefully, if I get them right, will look after the longer-term ones.
So, Ross, well, it's come to that end. And on behalf of the LODown team, and I'll speak on behalf of our fans community, the Orient Faithful, thank you. I think this has really been, we covered off some stuff that's out there in the ether. People know about you already, which is great. And there's some other spins on that, and you've opened up a little bit. I think always your openness, your honesty has been fabulous for us to all to see. And more importantly, we've seen a little bit more about the passionate side, what drives you, the influences that sit behind you. And more importantly, sort of that, the emotion that comes with the journey you've been on as a fan, seeing what happened, sadly with Justin, dealing with that and moving forward. Quick one. Orient's win, estate agencies a loss, you know, so that's cool. But just to wrap up, and I think it's been mentioned a few times, and that you're a bit of an imposter, and your career's been a bit of an imposter. But I think these episodes truly show that couldn't be further away from the truth. And thanks, Ross. Good luck. And hopefully we can get the season back underway. But more importantly, looks forward to next season, getting that mid-table, even to the playoffs.
Never try me, always still right by me. Make living life be highly spoken of. My only love, the only one. You're my wifey, make my life